So if I watch a movie and I'm not a big fan of it after the first watch, the likelihood of me coming back to the movie is almost zero. And I think most people can relate to that. The Conjuring was one of those movies for me. I'd seen it maybe 10 years ago and it was like super forgettable for me. All I remembered from it was that it was a supernatural horror movie that I didn't like. Despite my low expectations going into the rewatch for this review, I was pleasantly surprised by this movie. Let's start talking about it here. So this movie came out in 2013. It was directed by James Wan. Just a super quick synopsis. Paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren work to help a family terrorized by a dark presence in their farmhouse. So, yeah, as someone who has never believed in ghosts, it used to be really hard for me to get into paranormal movies. Like the whole idea of pictures flying off your walls and possessed family members yelling mean things at each other never really was scary to me. Like in order for me to really get into a paranormal movie, you would either have to have the characters in it be extremely skeptical, like they would in a real life scenario, and or you would need the ghost or whatever entity is haunting the people to show that it's a real threat by either harming people, killing people, something like that, for it to be believable for me. Otherwise, it would just, I can't imagine it being a real threat. And like I said, it's just hard for me to get into a movie like that. But with this movie, yeah, it was different this time around. It was easier for me to suspend my disbelief. I found that as I've gotten older, it's kind of become that way. At the beginning of The Conjuring, I really felt like I was going to have to do some serious mental gymnastics to get through it. But as the film continued, it got much easier. I kind of let my guard down and was able to enjoy it more. So let's get into kind of what I liked here. So this first part is going to be spoiler free, or I'm going to try to keep it as spoiler free as possible. But some things that I liked. Yeah, like I said, once I got into The Conjuring, my guard began to drop and I got a little more comfortable with the movie. Yeah, it's just a real generic, like everyman's horror movie, but it has some very good scenes in it, some very memorable, like spooky, fun scenes in it, and there's some good jump scares. I'll talk more specifically about the scenes that I really enjoyed in the spoiler section, but just know that that's what really makes this movie for me, is the spine-tingling scenes. They're not like, none of them are so scary that it gives you, it makes you want to turn away from the screen or anything like that. But they're creepy enough to be fun, which is why I like them in this movie. They did a great job at just giving us, some fun, slightly creepy paranormal scenes. As far as the jump scares, they weren't crazy in this movie as far as like overdone. They were a little bit too frequent, but there were some good ones in this movie that I think a good jump scare requires that it really catches you off guard. And there were a couple in the movie that really, kind of caught me off guard, which I enjoyed, but I did think there were too many of them, and this movie relies a little bit too much on jump scares. There were never any really cheap ones. When I think of cheap, I think of, the first one that I think of is in Sinister, at the end of Sinister. Man, the worst jump scare ever. Stupid. Nothing like that. All right, so what didn't I like? First thing I didn't really like, these are kind of the main things. I'll talk about smaller details later in the spoiler section, but these are kind of the bigger things that brought the movie down for me. The first was the ending. In a movie like this, when we get to the ending, I want it to be kind of like a finale. We got through the whole movie. We had some really cool scenes and experiences as we went through the movie. And I want this to be like the moment that brings it all together. I want the big guns to be brought out here. I want a really fun ending. But really, it was just, for me at least, it wasn't as impressive as I would have hoped. There was a good moment in that ending scene that I liked, but the rest of it was just like not super impressive. So that kind of held it back for me. The movie felt like a build up to this ending that just kind of plateaued out at the end. Wasn't a big fan. Not the end of the world, but the major thing that holds this movie back, in my opinion, is the way that anytime a question arises about how the supernatural world works in this movie, Ed and Lorraine just explain it all away, in gory detail. Everything is explained by these, and I get it. Ed and Lorraine, they're paranormal investigators. That's what they do. But just because someone's an expert in something doesn't mean they have to know everything. Think of if they hadn't done this and they just show like little hints and details at how this supernatural world works. It would be so much more interesting. But they didn't do that. And I get it. It's meant for a more casual audience who doesn't want to pick apart a movie. They just want to sit down and have a spooky, fun time. But I do think you can do both at the same time. I think you can have a movie that doesn't explain everything to you, that is also a casual experience. It can be enjoyed on different levels. And they did not do that here. So now let's get into the spoilers a little bit. Not going to go crazy on this, but when I do my movie reviews, I think that small details matter. So I like to just take notes on some things that I liked and I disliked. First thing that I disliked, and keep in mind these are small, nitpicky type of things, but they do matter. Annabelle's face. This is more of a critique on the franchise as a whole, because Annabelle's not a huge part of this movie. When you have a creepy doll or something like that, it needs to fall within the uncanny valley. And Annabelle's face is just far too scary to where it becomes unbelievable. So it ruins the creepiness of it for me. Another thing was there was a scene where Lorraine picks up a picture off the family's mantle in their house, and she's like, "Oh, this was a nice day at the beach." And then the mom is right there next to her, and she's like, "Oh my God, how did you know?" The movie tries to play it off like Lorraine had some like superpowers, and that's how she knew it was a good day at the beach. Anyone with a brain can look at the picture and make the assumption that the family enjoyed their day at the beach. They're all smiling. The weather's great. We're going to show that Lorraine has this really uncanny intuition or like these superpowers. And that's how you decide to show it. I thought that was silly. Also, there's one scene in the movie where they're like trying to figure out what's going on, and they're in this one room of the house that gets all cold because there's a presence in the room. And I've seen this done in other movies. It never works out. The CGI fake breath, never a good idea. It always looks like shit. You either need to make the room actually cold and have real breath, or you find another way to make it look cold. These are all small things that just take me out of the movie a little bit. The things that I wrote down that I liked, the first one was actually interesting because I was going to write it down as something I didn't like. Turned out to be something that I liked and I appreciated. It was when the kids arrive at the house at the beginning of the movie and they're all running in like, "Hey, this is going to be my room. Oh, I'm going to go find my room and claim it first." In what scenario would the kids have not seen this house before? But then I looked into it a little bit, and I guess the real people in this real story, the mother had bought the house sight unseen. So it was actually the first time that the kids had seen the house. So what was kind of like come on, like, what are we doing here moment for me turned into be like a nice little nod by the creators of this movie to what actually happened. The house was very beautiful. Like, if we're going to have like this whole story based off of a house that we're spending all of our time in, I want it to look good. I want it to be a place that would feel good to be in. The score was really good. I enjoyed the score, and very good job at creating a spooky atmosphere. Before we wrap things up, I want to talk about this two specific scenes that I really enjoyed out of this film the most. The first one was towards the beginning of the movie when the mom is playing hide and seek, and I think it's with one of the girls. The girl goes off and hides, and then the mom has her blindfold so she can't see what's going on. And the girl, it claps so that the mom can try to find where she's hiding, because she can't see. and she gets led into one of the rooms. It was the room with like the dresser in it, or the wardrobe. And as she goes in, she can't see what's going on in the room, but we can, and we see the dresser open up, and then these hands come out and clap that are clearly like some entity or ghost. The hands don't belong to the girl. That scene was so fucking good. I really liked that. The second scene that I had a really good time with, I think it's in the trailer, but the scene where Lorraine is outside hanging a sheet up on the clothesline, and it gets blown off by the wind, but then suddenly it stops. It gets caught by a ghost that had been standing there that we couldn't see, but now that the sheet is wrapped around the ghost, you can see the outline of it. So she's like, oh shit. The sheet gets blown away up to the house. The sheet hits a window on the house and then is blown away again. And when the sheet is blown away from the side of the house, we can see through the window that now there is a figure standing there in the window, and it starts walking into the house. So Lorraine is like, oh shit, she runs back into the house. Man, that was so good. Like, if you want to talk about like making a good spooky little sequence for this type of movie, that's gold. Like, that's the way to do it right there. Shit like that, seeing those two scenes, like, you can see kind of what I'm saying. They set my expectations for kind of what the ending would be. I thought we were going to get a bunch of these type of scenes at the end. I guess one honorable mention, there's a scene where I think it's the police officer is recording, and we're seeing it from the perspective of this camera as he follows Ed and Lorraine down into the basement to try to discover what's going on down there. They go down there, they don't find anything, and as they're going back up from the basement, Ed and Lorraine go up the stairs first, and then the cameraman follows behind. Just that one little touch of the cameraman being the last one up the stairs, it was so good, man. It reminds me of like when you were a little kid and you had to go down to the basement for whatever reason, and you turn the light off because you have to turn it off, pull chain downstairs, whatever. You're trying to get up before the demons get you, like you're just running up the stairs trying to get out of the dark, get back up to upstairs where it's safe. All right, so wrapping up this review, the movie genuinely surprised me. Like I said, it was almost like watching it for the first time again, because I didn't remember much about the movie, seeing it 10 years ago. So coming back and liking it was a surprise. If you accept this movie for what it is, a casual, supernatural experience, then you'll almost certainly enjoy it. It's nothing more than that. So just, keep your expectations realistic. It could have been a better movie than it is if it weren't for all the info dumping and some just other small issues. So I'm going to go ahead and give this movie a 7 out of 10. And that's it. Thanks for watching.